So the other day, an out-of-town friend called me up with a spontaneous suggestion. She had decided to take a day off work and was thinking about hiking a trail not too far from where I live. And while she was in the area, she wondered, would I be up for a visit? Yes. I had flexibility that day and I was delighted to see her. I thought, how lucky am I to have friends who take spontaneous adventures and carve out time to see me. I also thought, wow, my friend is going on this amazingly beautiful hike just an hour or so from where I live, and I personally have not taken that hike in over 30 years. Why is that? So this summer, I'll be turning 50 years old, and as I reflect on the last few decades of my adult life, I am noticing some changes, like I used to take more adventures. This summer I was turning 20, for example. I got on an airplane and I flew to Belgium to live with strangers and work in a place I'd never even seen pictures of, as the internet did not yet exist. When I had a free morning, I loved to get on a borrowed bicycle and ride through the Belgian countryside, taking any road that looked interesting. I never knew where I was. I didn't even have a map, but I saw scenic villages and I enjoyed the freedom of being somewhere else. As that summer turned into fall, I headed to France to attend university, and once again, I spent a lot of my free time riding my bike, exploring the area. Now, I did take a local map, but now and again, I would consult the map and realized I had cycled somewhere off the map, no telling how far and which direction. This would never happen now, would it, with the internet, but we kind of expected it to happen in those days. And while I found it mildly disconcerting to realize I was off course, I also found some of the coolest things that way, like an old ruined church in the middle of nowhere. I had no idea where I was, but it was a cool place to discover. I even made friends with a lovely couple from New Orleans who showed up while I was there, although unlike me, I think they had tried to find that place. They had a map, a better one. Sometimes my off-the-map adventures weren't so pleasant. Like, the winter evening, I was trying to get home and I found myself in an unfamiliar part of town. You see, old French cities, they are not built on square grids like modern American cities, so what feels like a 90-degree turn might only be 60 degrees, which over time takes you to a very different place. And I did not know that place where I found myself, only that it was very dark and the street was empty. I began to wonder if I was completely safe. I shivered in the cold winter night, contemplating the wisdom of it all, not just that bike ride, but the whole trip. You see, back in California, I had worked nearly full-time to support myself, but in France, I did not have the legal right to work, and I was running low on funds. My housing was paid for, my return ticket purchased, but I still had to eat for the next few weeks until I could go home and start making money again. I'd done the math to determine how much food I could afford to buy, and I started to wonder, can I survive on such meager rations? I guessed I would have to. I just hoped I wouldn't get sick. Those were pretty dark thoughts on a dark evening on an empty street, but something on the sidewalk caught my attention. So I got off my bike and I picked it up. It was a wallet. Well, I looked around, but there was no one in sight and every window was dark. I opened the wallet, of course, to check for an ID, but there was no identifying paperwork. That wallet was empty, except for a 200 franc note, about 40 bucks. Not a fortune, but a total lifeline to me, as it meant I could buy groceries for the last few weeks of my stay. In that moment, I felt the presence of God as close as I ever had. I wonder if that is how the children of Israel felt as they wandered through the wilderness on their way out of Egypt. It was taking a long time and they seemed to be off course. What should have been a fairly direct trip took forever. 40 years, the story goes, though that's likely an exaggeration because ancient Hebrew writers often use the number 40 to mean a good long time or as long as it takes. However long it took too long and the travelers were getting worried. Where would the food come from? Back in Egypt, things had been awful, but at least they had had gardens and had eaten decently. On the road, they were wondering where was God in their time of need. But their needs were always met, what with water flowing from rocks and manna appearing on the ground, just the amount they needed. Kind of like a wallet on a sidewalk with some anonymous cash, only more poetic. The poet who wrote the Exodus story says that God went before the people like a cloud of smoke by day and a pillar of fire by night, so they would never doubt God's presence. And their time in the wilderness, however long it really was what it took to teach them what Barbara Brown Taylor calls the holy art of being lost. Now, we may not think of being lost as an art form, holy or otherwise, but maybe it can be. In her lovely book, An Altar in the World, Barbara Brown Taylor declares, "I have decided to stop fighting the prospect of getting lost and engage it as a spiritual practice instead. The Bible is a great help to me in this practice, since it reminds me that God does some of God's best work with people who are truly seriously lost. People like Abraham and Sarah, who left their familiar home and wandered all over the place, guided by God who gave them nothing more than a promise. Were they lost? Often. But the blessings they found form our spiritual heritage, the overarching story of our faith. Their descendants, those children of Israel who wandered through the wilderness in search of the promised land, they were certainly lost, but as Taylor points out, by the time they arrived in the land of milk and honey, they knew how to say thank you and mean it." And if we follow the continuous story of the Bible, we might notice that getting lost is a persistent theme, but those who are lost receive blessings. The prophet Elijah learned to hear God's still small voice. The exiled Judeans learned that God was with them even in Babylon. And even Jesus was able to discern his divine calling, following his willingness to get lost in the desert for a while. Getting lost isn't such a bad thing. In fact, getting lost is often how we encounter the divine. The children of Israel learned to follow that cloud of smoke and pillar of fire, divine encounters if ever there were. Jesus, during his time in the wilderness, was ministered to by angels. I suspect there are always angels around us, but we may only think to look for them when we need them, when we're lost. Which is how I felt the day I arrived in Europe, a fresh-faced 19-year-old on my first trip out of the country. Once I got off that airplane, I realized just how lost I was. I knew I should take a train, but which one? With effort, I navigated the schedule and found the first of several trains I needed. I sat alone in the very back of an empty car, and pretty soon I was joined by a man who was very friendly and quite eager to help a new arrival. He kindly bought me a chocolate milk from the refreshment cart, and then he showed me an album full of sketches and photographs of beautiful young women he claimed to have made famous. He could sketch me too, he said. I began to realize just how many ways a traveler could get lost, trusting the wrong guides. So on the next train, I decided to sit next to someone safer than that guy. There was a young woman with a pleasant face sitting by herself. I joined her and we struck up a conversation. She had deep empathy for this naive American girl traveling all alone with more luggage than life skills, and she derailed her entire agenda just so she could help me out at the connecting station. She bought me some water, she gave me a phone card so I could call my host family and let them know what time my next train would arrive in their town. And when I handed her the phone, too exhausted to speak another word in French, she talked to them for me. Then she waited until she had seen me safely aboard my train, helping me with my heavy luggage, and she gave me her phone number in case I ever needed a friend. I did, and she's been my friend ever since. You see, there really are angels in the wilderness, but you have to get a little bit lost to see them. All of that was 30 years ago. Now that I am decidedly in middle age, I have to remind myself to have more adventures. Maybe the risk of getting lost isn't as bad as the risk of missing all the blessings of the scenic route. And you don't even have to leave the country. You can drive a different way to the store. Maybe even take that one road you've always wondered about. What have you got to lose except maybe 15 minutes? Or maybe next time you go to a restaurant, you can choose a new one, even a kind you've never tried before. Worst thing that can happen is you don't love your meal. You can go to a movie that isn't your usual pick. You can borrow a library book from a genre you don't usually read. You can take a class to learn something you've never tried. Some new hobby, a musical instrument, even a new language. Why not? You will feel a little lost, and that is the point. As Barbara Brown Taylor says, getting lost is a meaningful spiritual practice. She even recommends keeping one's eyes open for opportunities to get slightly lost so that you can gradually build the muscles necessary for radical trust. The older I get, the more this makes sense to me. Life can be unpredictable despite our best efforts to manage things. For all that we can control, there is much we cannot. I understand that our routines are our coping mechanisms, predictable patterns that convince us nothing needs to change, only that's not true. Life is all about change, whether we like the changes or not. We will be put to the test, forced into the wilderness from time to time. How will we survive it if we have not practiced the art of getting lost? Barbara Brown Taylor concludes her chapter on the practice of getting lost with these thoughts. It can happen anywhere in all kinds of ways. You can get lost on your way home. You can get lost looking for love. You can get lost between jobs. You can get lost looking for God. However it happens, take heart. Others before you have found a way in the wilderness where there are as many angels as there are wild beasts, and plenty of other lost people too. All it takes is one of them to find you. All it takes is you to find one of them. However it happens, you could do worse than to kneel down and ask a blessing, remembering how many knees have kissed this altar before you. Whether or not you travel this summer, I hope you'll find at least one way to practice getting lost, because we know who will lead us.